Okay, so if you're a startup founder, you definitely know this feeling. You signed up for some powerful all-in-one HR software that's supposed to save you a ton of time, but then you find yourself spending weeks, literally weeks, just getting the thing set up. Today, we're going to dig into why these huge platforms like Rippling can actually be total overkill for a growing company, and we'll explore some alternatives that are really built for speed and focus. So when it comes to your company's HR, what do you actually need? Do you need a giant, complex cockpit, like a 747 with hundreds of buttons and switches that you have to learn to fly yourself? Or do you need an autopilot that just handles all the critical, non-negotiable stuff so you can get back to, building your business? That's really the core question we're tackling here. All right, let's start with the Rippling reality check. And look, let's be clear, Rippling is an incredibly powerful platform. It was built to scale to thousands and thousands of employees, which is genuinely impressive. But for a startup, that power can actually be a huge problem. You end up inheriting all this complexity that was designed for a company 10, maybe 100 times your size, and you probably don't have a dedicated HR team to manage it all. And that complexity, it shows up right from day one. A full Rippling deployment can take anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks. I mean, for a startup, that's an eternity. Just think about the opportunity cost there. That's a month, maybe more, that you could be spending on your product or talking to customers. But instead, you're just bogged down in this massive software implementation. And what happens when you run into a real problem, an urgent one? You need to actually get a human being on the phone, right? Well, with Rippling, your company needs to have over 150 employees just to unlock that level of support. If you're smaller than that, you're pretty much stuck with chat-only options, which is a massive point of friction when you have a critical payroll or a compliance emergency on your hands. And then you run into some pretty significant trade-offs. You're often locked into these annual contracts, and here's the big one. Compliance is still a do-it-yourself project. Rippling gives you the tools, sure, but you're the one on the hook for figuring out confusing tax notices and opening new state tax accounts, which, by the way, means navigating a totally different clunky.gov website for every single state you hire in. So if that's the problem, what's the alternative? Especially for you startups out there that are hiring all over the country. Well, there's one platform, Warp, that was built specifically to solve these exact problems. It's designed less like a set of tools you have to operate and more like an automated service that just works for you. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The real-world impact of this approach is pretty significant. Take this quote from the CEO of Bland AI. They switched from Rippling to Warp right in the middle of a huge growth phase. For them, scaling from 10 to 100 employees, the difference wasn't just a minor improvement. He called it striking. And this really gets to the heart of the difference in philosophy. With Rippling, compliance is a DIY project where they hand you the tools. With Warp, the entire goal is to have it done for you. Their AI agents are literally designed to handle the actual work. The tedious registrations, the quarterly filings, the tax notices, all of it automatically in the background. So, what does that automation actually look like in practice? It's pretty simple. You hire someone in a new state, that's it. From there, Warp's AI opens all the necessary tax accounts on your behalf. Then it files all the required returns for you. And get this, it even intercepts and resolves tax notices before you even see them. The whole goal is just you never have to visit a .gov website again. But it's not just the automation. The entire experience is tailored for startups. Every single company, no matter the size, gets a dedicated account manager. It's not an upsell, it's not reserved for giant clients, and when you need help, you get a real human based in New York City with a 5-minute median response time. And if you feel like you're stuck on another platform, they can migrate you in under 10 minutes. Now, of course, Warp isn't the only other game in town. To get the full picture, let's take a look at 2 other major players in the space, Gusto and Justworks, and see exactly where they fit into this whole landscape. First up, Gusto. Gusto is hugely popular and honestly, for good reason. It's a really affordable and effective option if you're a small team, maybe under 25 people, and you're operating mostly in one state. But the minute you start hiring across state lines, you're going to have to upgrade to their pricier Plus plan. And even then, compliance is often outsourced to third parties, which can create a whole new set of headaches. Okay, so to understand our next player, Justworks, you first have to understand what a PEO is. It stands for Professional Employer Organization. Basically, a PEO becomes a co-employer of your team. This allows them to handle all the HR, benefits, and compliance stuff, but it comes with some very specific trade-offs. So, Justworks is a PEO. Its main strength, its big selling point, is giving even tiny companies access to enterprise-level benefits. And that makes a lot of sense if your goal is just to completely outsource all of your HR functions. The catch? Well, it's more expensive and you do give up some control because your team is technically co-employed by Justworks.
All right, so let's put these platforms side by side and actually look at the data. Let's get objective here and see how they really stack up on the factors that matter most to a startup: cost, compliance, and support.
Looking at the numbers, you can see right away that the sticker price does not tell the whole story. Gusto has the cheapest entry point for sure, and the Justworks PEO model is the priciest. But look at that state tax registration row. That's the one that's really telling. With Rippling, it's self-service. It's on you. With Gusto, it's handled by a third party. Warp and Justworks are the only two here where it's truly automatic from the get-go.
So with all that in mind, how in the world do you choose? Let's break it down. Here's a super simple framework to help you decide which platform is actually the right fit for your company right here, right now.
You should absolutely lean toward Warp if you're an ambitious, multi-state startup. If compliance is your single biggest headache and you want it handled for you, not handed to you as another project, this is the platform that was built for that exact problem. And if you value fast, human support, it's a no-brainer. Now, Gusto is probably the right call if you're a smaller team, primarily operating in just one state, and your absolute #1 priority is keeping costs as low as possible. It really does handle the basics well for that specific use case. And Justworks is going to be your answer if your main goal is to completely wash your hands of HR and outsource the entire function. If getting those top-tier benefits is absolutely critical and you're okay with the higher costs and the co-employment model, then the PEO route makes a lot of sense. And hey, if you're listening to this right now and feeling stuck on a platform that just isn't the right fit, it's worth noting that the friction to switch is getting lower and lower. Some providers, like Warp, will even offer things like contract buyouts and handle the entire migration for free, just to make it easier for you to move from a platform like Rip.
Ultimately, the choice of an HR platform really comes down to one simple question. Are you spending your time building an internal HR department just to manage a bunch of complex tools? Or are you spending your time building your actual business? The right platform should empower you to do the latter every single time.